Hey there. Welcome to our deep dive into ancient Rome.
All right.
Everyone knows about gladiators and emperors and, Veni Vidi Vici.
Right.
But what if I told you that Roman history is like way more complicated than those like iconic images that we always see?
Absolutely.
So we're diving into Mary Beard's book, SPQR, to like uncover the real story of ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And lucky for us, we've got an expert here to help us unpack it all.
We'll unpack, we shall.
Wow.
Mary Beard's work is great because she really challenges these common myths that we have about Rome. Like, for example, their expansion.
Okay.
We often picture this strategic, unstoppable force, with a plan to take over the world.
Right.
But Beard suggests it was way more complicated than that.
Okay, so not some grand strategy from like day one.
Right.
I've got to admit, it is easy to imagine legions just marching across Europe, with a set destination in mind.
Sure, but it wasn't like Rome was marching into these peaceful, untouched lands.
Right.
Picture a world that's already full of conflict. You've got different factions, mini empires all vying for control.
Yeah.
Rome just happened to come out on top.
Okay.
But not without some stumbles along the way.
So more like a chaotic free-for-all with Rome like strategically coming out on top at the end.
Exactly. And their rise was far from effortless.
Okay.
Think about the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE.
Right.
Hannibal, a Carthaginian general, completely defeated the Romans there.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about something like 70,000 Roman soldiers dead in a single day.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that's multiple times the casualties at Gettysburg.
Yeah, that's a staggering loss.
Yeah.
Especially for an army with a reputation for being like, invincible.
Yeah.
It makes you really question the whole unstoppable Roman war machine thing.
It certainly does, and it shows that the Romans had to adapt and learn from their defeats as they expanded into new territories and faced unfamiliar enemies.
Yeah, for sure. So this is where things get really interesting for me because we're stepping away from these grand battlefields and we're diving right into the heart of Roman society.
Okay.
Specifically during the Republic in the 1st century BCE.
Oh, a fascinating period.
I think so.
Imagine Rome going through some serious growing pains.
Okay.
This is when they transition from a monarchy to a republic.
Right.
And of course, that led to all sorts of power struggles and tensions as different groups tried to shape the future of Rome.
Yeah. And the cool thing is we get a front row seat to this drama through all the writing from this period.
Yeah, tons of it.
Beard mentions sources like Cicero's letters, which are packed with everyday details.
Absolutely.
I mean, who knew that a powerful orator like Cicero would be so stressed out about his book collection?
Right.
We also have accounts of the Catiline conspiracy, which honestly sounds more like an ancient thriller than a historical event.
Oh, absolutely. Those sources aren't just some dry historical accounts.
Right.
They're packed with intrigue, betrayal, political maneuvering, all the good stuff.
Right.
And speaking of fascinating documents, let's not forget about the 12 Tables. This collection of Roman laws.
Those are the ones that even covered magic spells, right?
All right.
I mean, it seems kind of strange to include that in a legal code.
It might seem odd to us.
Yeah.
But remember, this was a society undergoing a period of immense change.
Okay.
And these laws against harmful magic give us a look into the anxieties of that time.
Okay.
There is this fear of the unknown, a desire to keep things in order.
Right.
In a world that was changing so rapidly. These weren't just laws. They reflected a society trying to define itself.
It makes you think about how those anxieties might have played out in their everyday lives.
For sure.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to this idea of Rome expanding not just through brute force, but through these strategic alliances.
Right.
Because Beard uses the example of Scipio Barbatus to illustrate this point.
Yes, Scipio Barbatus was a Roman general back in the 3rd century BCE.
Okay.
And on his epitaph, it boasts about how he subdued this region called Lucania in southern Italy. But when we compare that to the historian Livy's account of the same events, we get a different perspective.
So we're seeing two sides of the same story.
In a way.
So what does Livy say?
Livy describes Rome forming an alliance with Lucania, not conquering it.
Okay.
This suggests that Roman expansion wasn't always about brute force.
Interesting.
They were masters of diplomacy, using alliances and strategic partnerships to spread their influence way beyond the battlefield.
So it was a more nuanced approach?
Yeah.
Like using a combination of military might and this shrewd diplomacy to get what they wanted.
Exactly. Think of it like this conquering territory takes a lot of manpower and resources.
Right.
And you need constant vigilance to keep things under control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But by forming alliances, Rome was essentially turning potential enemies into assets.
Wow.
Sharing the spoils of war and creating a system of mutual benefit.
That's incredibly strategic.
Right.
It's almost like they were building this network of power rather than just conquering land.
You've got it. And that's what's so remarkable about Rome's alliance system.
Okay.
It's unlike anything else the ancient world had ever seen.
So how did it work?
So when Rome defeated an enemy, they didn't just conquer and absorb them.
Right.
They offered them a chance to join this growing network,
Okay.
to get in on the spoils of war and benefit from Rome's continued expansion.
Okay, I can see how that would be enticing, especially for a defeated power.
Right.
But how effective was it really?
Very effective. By the end of the 4th century BCE,
Okay.
Rome could call on a massive force of almost 500,000 troops.
Wow.
Largely thanks to their allies.
That's incredible.
It made them almost untouchable in the Italian peninsula.
Right.
It was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
How so?
The more they won, the larger their alliance network grew, and the more powerful they became.
So they were essentially building a superpower
Yeah,
through collaboration as much as through conquest.
you got it.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But this rapid expansion, all these new people coming in, must have had a huge impact on Roman society.
Absolutely.
We're talking about different cultures, languages, ways of life, all converging on Rome.
And that's where we'll pick up when we return.
Oh, well.
Because while Rome was busy conquering the outside world, a whole other revolution was brewing from within.
All right, we'll be right back after a quick break.
You know, we often think of ancient Rome as this monolithic thing.
Yeah.
But it was always evolving,
Right.
especially during this time of huge expansion.
Yeah.
Think about it. Thousands of people from all over the Mediterranean
Okay.
pouring into Rome,
Yeah.
bringing their customs, languages, beliefs.
Right.
It was a melting pot of cultures.
Yeah, for sure.
And it totally reshaped Roman society.
It's mind-boggling how a society can absorb that much change so quickly.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what kind of impact this had on the average Roman.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about Cicero and the elite,
Yeah.
but what about the everyday experiences of just, regular people?
Well, that's what I love about Meyerbeer. She doesn't just focus on the emperors and senators.
Right.
She brings us into the homes and workshops and streets of ancient Rome.
Yeah.
And she gives a voice to those often ignored by history.
I like that.
Like, for example, she uses something as simple as tombstones to paint a picture of Roman society.
Tombstones. That sounds a little morbid.
Maybe a little.
But I'm intrigued. What can we learn from how Romans chose to be remembered after they died?
It's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
See, the Roman elite, the senators, the patricians,
Yeah.
they love to display their political offices and family names on their tombs.
Okay, makes sense.
But the common people, the bakers, the blacksmiths, the shopkeepers,
Yeah.
they define themselves by their professions.
Interesting.
You'd see things like Marcus the carpenter or Lucius the goldsmith.
Ah.
It's like they wanted their skills, their contributions to society to be remembered forever.
It's a subtle distinction, but it says a lot about how they saw themselves,
Exactly.
within this expanding empire.
It challenges our assumptions about social mobility in ancient Rome.
So.
It suggests a level of pride in one's craft,
Yep.
a sense of identity rooted in something other than power or lineage.
Right. And it wasn't just about individual identity.
No.
Rome had these social structures called collegia.
Ah, yes. The collegiate.
They were kind of like guilds or trade associations, right?
That's right. Bringing people together based on their professions.
But what's interesting is that they weren't just for citizens.
No, they weren't.
Even freedmen and slaves could participate.
Exactly. The collegia were a fascinating microcosm of Roman society.
In what way?
Imagine these organizations providing a space for people from all walks of life to connect, to socialize, to support each other,
Yeah.
even to advocate for their collective interests.
It really complicates the image of Rome as this rigid hierarchical society.
It does. It reminds us that Roman society, like any society, was full of different experiences, different perspectives, different dreams.
And it was in those everyday interactions, those shared struggles and triumphs,
Yes,
that the true character of Rome emerged.
I think so.
It makes you wonder how these everyday Romans felt about all the political turmoil that was always going on.
Yeah.
We were talking about power struggles, ambitious generals,
Right.
the eventual fall of the Republic.
It was a tumultuous time.
Did they feel stuck in the middle of it all?
It's a question that still fascinates historians.
Yeah.
And while we can't know for sure what every Roman felt,
Right.
sources like Cicero's letters offer some clues.
Oh, how so?
Here we have this incredibly powerful man,
Yeah.
deeply involved in the politics of the day.
Right.
Yet he's worried about his book collection,
Yeah.
managing his household,
Oh, okay.
dealing with those everyday anxieties that we can all relate to.
It really humanizes him.
It does.
Reminds us that even the biggest figures in history were still just people trying to figure things out.
I like that.
But speaking of political drama, we can't forget about Julius Caesar.
Yes.
His rise to power was a massive turning point in Roman history.
It marked the shift from republic to empire.
Exactly. And Caesar really embodies both the brilliance and the danger of ambition.
He certainly does.
I mean, he was a military genius, a gifted politician, a master of propaganda,
Right.
all while having this undeniable charisma that captivated people.
His famous line, Veni Vidi Vici.
I saw, I conquered.
Exactly. It wasn't just a boast, it was a powerful statement.
It really was.
But his ambition came at a price.
How so?
He wasn't afraid to shake things up,
Yeah.
even if it meant clashing with the Senate or breaking with tradition.
Like his triumphal procession,
Oh, yes, those were something else.
parading his defeated enemies through the streets of Rome.
A very deliberate display of power.
A message to everyone that he was a force to be reckoned with.
And of course, it ultimately led to his downfall.
The Ides of March 44 BC.
A date etched in history.
And his assassination, while shocking,
Yeah,
it created a power vacuum
it did.
that would eventually be filled by his adopted son, Octavian.
Who would become Augustus, the first Roman emperor?
What a legacy.
Indeed.
It's incredible to think that this chaotic period ultimately paved the way for the Roman Empire.
It's true.
This empire that would shape Western civilization for centuries.
A pivotal moment in history.
But before we dive into the world of emperors and empires,
Yes.
I'm curious how Augustus, this ruthless general, transformed himself into this revered leader,
Right.
this almost godlike figure in the eyes of the Roman people.
Augustus, a masterclass in political maneuvering and image control.
And that's where we'll pick up when we return.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back after this short break. So we're back and ready to unpack Augustus.
Hooray.
It's crazy how he went from being Caesar's heir in this time of total chaos
Yeah,
to becoming this almost godlike figure to the Romans.
right.
How did he manage that?
It's a transformation that's really key to understanding Rome's shift from republic to empire.
Okay.
You see, Augustus, he was really smart.
Yeah.
He knew that brute force, while effective in the short term,
Wouldn't create lasting stability.
I see.
He needed the Roman people on his side.
Okay.
They had to see him not as some dictator,
Yeah.
but as a savior,
Okay.
as a guardian of Roman tradition and virtue.
So less, I came, I saw, I conquered.
Exactly.
And more, I'm here to restore peace and order.
Precisely. And he used every tool he had to do this.
Okay, like what?
We'll take his official portraits, for example.
Okay.
These weren't just about capturing what he looked like.
Right.
They were carefully crafted propaganda,
Okay.
often showing him as youthful,
Yeah.
idealized,
Right.
radiating authority and divine favor.
I get it.
Imagine these images everywhere you look.
Okay.
In town squares, government buildings, even people's homes.
Subtle but effective.
Exactly. Out with the old tumultuous republic.
Right.
And in with this new era of peace and prosperity under Augustus.
And his autobiography, The Res Gestae, was like a masterclass in spin, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he presented himself as this reluctant ruler.
Someone who brought peace and order after years of civil war,
Exactly.
conveniently downplaying his own role in all the chaos.
It's amazing how he was able to rewrite the narrative
It is.
to control how people saw his rise to power.
But he did make some real changes too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Augustus was no fool.
Okay.
He understood that real power wasn't just about appearances.
Okay.
It was about creating a system that worked.
So what did he do?
Well, he completely overhauled the army,
Okay.
made it more professional, more loyal.
Right.
He reformed the tax system and how the provinces were run,
Okay.
reducing corruption and making things more efficient.
So these weren't just cosmetic changes.
No, these were about strengthening the very foundations of the empire,
I see.
ensuring its stability for the long haul.
So he created a system that would outlast him,
Exactly.
cementing his legacy for generations.
Precisely.
But ruling a vast empire like Rome must have come with its own challenges. I mean, how do you maintain control over such a huge territory?
It's a challenge every empire faces.
With all these different cultures and languages.
It's true. And this is where Rome's approach to cultural integration gets really interesting.
Okay, in what way?
Well, unlike some empires that tried to erase local customs
Okay.
and impose their own culture,
Right.
the Romans were surprisingly adaptable.
So less about forcing everyone to become Roman
Right.
and more about finding ways to incorporate different cultures into the system.
Exactly. They understood that one size fits all just wouldn't work,
Right.
not in an empire as diverse as theirs.
So what did they do?
Well, they often took a more practical approach,
Okay.
allowing local customs and traditions to continue,
Yeah.
as long as they didn't directly challenge Roman authority.
That makes sense. Were there any cases where they did try to encourage assimilation?
Oh, sure. There were definitely times when they encouraged it.
Okay.
For example, Beard talks about this Roman governor in Britain
Okay.
who actively encouraged the sons of local elites
Okay.
to get a Roman education.
Like in...
Rhetoric, philosophy, law, that sort of thing.
So they were creating a new generation of Romanized leaders.
Exactly. These young men would then go back to their communities,
Right.
fluent in Latin,
Yeah.
immersed in Roman culture.
I see.
They'd act as a bridge between their people and the Roman rulers.
That's clever.
It was a way to create a class of loyal intermediaries
Okay.
who could help run things and spread Roman influence from within.
Sounds like a win-win, at least on the surface.
Right.
But surely not everyone was happy about being part of the Roman Empire.
Of course not.
There had to be some pushback to this kind of cultural and political domination.
Absolutely. Romanization wasn't always peaceful.
Right.
There were uprisings, rebellions,
Okay.
constant challenges to Roman authority throughout the empire.
Can you give an example?
Sure, Beard talks about Boudica,
Okay.
the fierce queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain.
Oh, right. Boudica's rebellion.
Her rebellion was a direct challenge to Roman rule. It was sparked by the horrible treatment she and her daughters suffered at the hands of Roman soldiers.
It's a reminder that Roman rule, while often seen as a civilizing force,
Right.
could also be brutal and oppressive.
It's true, especially for those who dared to resist.
It makes you think about how people coped with living in this vast empire.
Yeah,
Some embraced Roman culture,
right.
others resisted, and some, like the Greek writer Pausanias, tried to erase Roman influence altogether.
It's what makes studying ancient Rome so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not a simple story of good guys and bad guys.
Right.
It's a mix of countless individual experiences,
Yeah.
all shaped by life under Roman rule.
We've talked about emperors, soldiers every day, Romans, rebels.
It's a diverse cast of characters.
Well, one of the most interesting stories Beard tells is about a man named Barates.
Oh, yes, Barati.
Tell me more about him.
He was from Palmyra in Syria,
Okay.
and he traveled all the way to Roman Britain,
Wow.
where he fell in love with a local woman named Regina,
That's amazing.
and they got married.
And what's cool is that their tombstone
Yeah.
was inscribed in both Latin and Palmyrene.
That's right, her language.
That's incredible. It
Yeah.
speaks to how interconnected the Roman world was.
It does.
How people moved, interacted, formed relationships across huge distances.
It makes you wonder how someone like Regina,
Yeah.
a woman from Roman Britain,
Right.
how does she see herself within this massive empire?
Did she feel Roman British? Something in between?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
What did it really mean to be Roman in this vast and complex world?
Yeah,
It's a question without an easy answer,
for sure.
and it's one that continues to fascinate historians today.
It really does make you think.
But it reminds us that Romanization wasn't just a one-way street.
Okay.
It was this dynamic process of cultural exchange,
Right.
adaptation, negotiation.
Yeah.
It played out differently in every corner of the empire.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into ancient Rome,
Yeah.
what's the key takeaway you hope our listeners are left with?
I'd say the most important thing to remember is that ancient Rome,
Yeah.
for all its grandeur and influence,
Right.
was ultimately about people.
It's true.
It was about the ambition of emperors,
Yeah.
the struggles of everyday families,
Right.
the dreams of those who traveled far and wide looking for a better life.
It's those personal stories that really make it resonate.
Absolutely.
And by understanding those stories,
Yes.
the stories of those who lived and loved and died in this empire,
Exactly.
we can truly appreciate the complexity
Right.
and the lasting impact of ancient Rome.
Well said.
This has been an amazing conversation.
It has.
Thanks for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into ancient Rome.